Hello and welcome to a little trip into the world of logic. When we say it's logical, isn't it? We refer to a logic whose characteristic feature is either or. If you take an apple as an example, the apple is either there or not there. Here, only one or the other can be true. A third possibility is expressly excluded in this logic. An outstanding representative of this classic logic of either or was the Greek philosopher Aristotle. First, the apple is there. Second, the apple is not there. Third, the apple is either there or not there. The first two principles also exist in the logic of the Indian philosopher Nagarjuna. First, the apple is there. Second, the apple is not there. Under point 3, however, with Nagarjuna, there is no either or as with Aristotle, but a both and. The apple is both there and not there. This sounds paradoxical at first, and that is why this logic is sometimes referred to as paradoxical logic. However, this apparent contradiction dissolves when one not only looks at the apple, but also takes into account the space that surrounds the apple. There is no apple anywhere in the space around the apple, and therefore that space represents no apple. And since this space is always there when the apple is there, the apple and no apple, the space without an apple, are always there together. Space and form always belong together. That's why the apple is both there and not there. In Nagarjuna's logic, there's also a fourth aspect, the neither nor. To understand this, you have to take into account the entire process of creating an apple. This image shows 4 phases of this entire process. The apple arises from the blossom from the tree from the sprout from the apple core, and that in turn from the apple. This is how the cycle works. In addition to the 4 processes shown here, this apple cycle also includes the transitions between the processes. For example, if I look now more closely at the transition from blossom to apple, it becomes clear that the apple can only emerge when the blossom is no longer there. So in this transition, there is a phase in which the blossom is no longer there and the apple is not there yet. This phase is characterized by a neither nor, neither blossom nor apple. I have shown this transition here as a horizontal dashed line with the label neither blossom nor apple. The apple then emerges from this transition phase. This transition phase, this in-between phase, also occurs in all other transitions. From apple to sprout, from sprout to tree, and from the tree without blossoms to the tree with blossoms. These transitions all have something in common. Something has dissolved here, is no longer there, and at the same time what emerges is not there yet. In these transitions there is nothing manifest, from which then something new manifests itself. That's why I call this area the not manifested potential, shown here as a light gray area in the lower part of the graphic. This graphic shows very clearly that all individual processes are connected as if in a complex organism. In this lively network, the individual phenomena such as apples, sprouts, trees, and blossoms can now be initiated and developed in a correct order and at the appropriate time. For example, the apple only grows when the blossom is no longer there. However, the apple only grows if other conditions such as sunshine and water are present. I have chosen the water cycle as an example here. In this cycle, according to the conventional idea, an H2O molecule in the river would evaporate there and become a water vapor, combine to form clouds, condense and fall to the ground as rain. In the ground, it would seep down to the roots of the apple tree and then rise through existing channels and capillaries into the leaves to the tree crown. So it would be one and the same H2O molecule that moves through the entire cycle, sometimes as water and sometimes as water vapor. Nagarjuna has taken a closer look at this traditional idea of a thing and its movement. In his treatise Mula Madhyamika Karika, he first reduced the idea of the permanent existence of a thing to absurdity, and then continued to dismantle the conventional idea of the movement of a thing completely. According to Nagarjuna's logic, there are no permanently existing H2O molecules in the water cycle. But if a water molecule does not exist permanently, it obviously cannot move. The water transport must therefore happen here without a single H2O molecule moving. I have presented this process here in two steps. A water molecule in the river dissolves into the not manifested potential and appears in the cloud as a completely new H2O molecule in the form of water vapor. Here again, there is this phase of in-between, the neither nor, which is fundamental in the logic of Nagarjuna. The well-known quantum physicist Professor Carlo Rovelli also refers to this when he talks about movement. If we see an object at the position A and then at B, we can make statements about A and B. But we can't say anything about the in-between. The graphic then shows the same picture for all other transitions in the water cycle. From cloud to rain, from rain to ground, and from the ground back to the river. In this next picture, you can see how the water cycle and the apple cycle work together. The water molecule in the ground under the apple tree dissolves into the not manifested potential and then manifests itself again as a completely new H2O molecule in the leaf of the tree. Some of these water molecules are then sweated out by the leaf and appear via a phase of in-between in the cloud as completely new water vapor molecules. What looks to us like a flow of water is actually a sequence of ever new H2O molecules that continually emerge from the not manifested potential. This is similar to a movie where the flashing of individual images become an uninterrupted movement in our perception. The graphic shows on the left the four processes, blossom, apple, sprout, tree, which are inextricably linked to each other via the not manifested potential. All processes are united as if in a single circle and form a mandala, according to the Buddhist tradition. A circle has no beginning, and there is no beginning here with the apple mandala. But if you look at each individual process, you can find beginnings there. For example, an apple begins to grow after the blossom has disappeared. This is why we also speak of beginningless beginning. Anyone who understands this logic also knows that the chicken and the egg are simply two phases of the cyclical overall process, like breathing in and breathing out. In this picture, the fundamental differences between the logic of Aristotle and Nagarjuna are summarized in short statements. Aristotle's logic is a logic that is helpful in dealing with things pragmatically, but it cuts with the exclusiveness of either or to living connections and thus leads to a false understanding of our world. Aristotle's logic emphasizes the separateness of things, and so we lose sight of what connects and lives. In contrast to the logic of either or, Nagarjuna's logic is a logic in which the cyclical processes of life, the liveliness of things, remain in focus. Existence and non-existence, being and not being, are not viewed as something opposite, but as something that belongs together. The Tibetan meditation master Chögyam Trungpa sums up this logic of the living. Things exist because they do not exist. In summary, Nagarjuna describes reality as the interaction of living processes, what Nagarjuna calls dependent arising or emptiness. Quote, dependent arising, this is what we call emptiness. This dependent arising, and with it emptiness, is clearly shown in this graphic. This allows one to understand important aspects of emptiness at a glance and in context. Reality is an organic overall process in which everything is connected to everything else via the not manifested potential. There is only the overall process, the indivisible whole, an interaction of living processes that are interconnected and interdependent. This means that none of these processes exist on its own, which means no process is independent. And each of these processes arise and pass away, meaning that nothing exists permanently. This means that reality is devoid of independent, permanent existence. And that is what is meant by emptiness. Often, emptiness is misunderstood as if there is nothing there. The opposite is the case. Precisely because reality is based on emptiness, on an existence that is neither independent nor permanent, there are, for example, the apple tree and the apple. And so we can pick up the apple, bite into it, and enjoy. This is magic in everyday life. Thank you for your interest. Any kind of feedback is always welcome. Further explanations and references to sources can be found in my book, Rethink, Perceive Freshly. You can download a special edition of the book as PDF file for free from my website.